Welcome to a new webinar here from our virtual studio of Business Markers, but we're actually in the AB Sound studios in Opwijk. And you'll be probably following this live through the Livestorm application. First, before we start, let me give you some tips. You can write comments or questions in the question section of the Livestorm application. And if you have any question during this webinar, don't hesitate to type it down, and we will handle the Q&A afterwards at the end of this session. Today we will discuss content marketing. We will talk about how you can build up a strong connection with your customers through content marketing, and we'll try to put that in 6 easy steps. Now, how did we get to this kind of topic? Well, about half a year ago, we launched a webinar on smarketing, and part of that smarketing, let's say, webinar was based on content and the fact that content is key whenever you want to build up a relationship with your customers. So content is still king, it's a way to gain credibility, to build up that relationship, and this is why we said we have to do a specific webinar on this topic, and also based on your questions, by the way. So it will be on content today, and content only. And there's a good reason, besides the fact that you had this as a request, is the fact that content marketing is very powerful. It's one of the most powerful tools that you can put forward as a company. And according to the Content Marketing Institute, it generates over 3 times as many leads as outbound marketing, with the advantage that it costs about 60% of what you would spend elsewhere. So there is a huge advantage. Everything that will be said during this webinar, it will help you to fill out the model, and there's a content marketing model which you can find on our website. So I would definitely recommend you to visit the Business Markers website to look for the content marketing model, to download it, and this will help you set up your own campaigns. Now, I haven't properly introduced myself yet, so I'm Christophe Sintebin. I'm one of the founders of Business Markers, and I've been in marketing for over 20 years in various sectors and helping companies to set up their marketing, but also their corporate strategies in the meantime. But let's say that content marketing is a very important element which has been there throughout my entire career. I'm not going to present this webinar alone. So I invited one of our experts, our content marketing experts, to the stage. So welcome, Rien van den Bos.
Thank you, Christophe. As mentioned, my name is Rien van den Bos. Working on content marketing, digital marketing at Business Markers. And talking about content marketing, let's dive into the definition right away, because there are lots of definitions on content marketing, but we found one which has 4 different phrases which are very, very important for your strategy. And first of all, content marketing is a strategic marketing approach. Secondly, focused on creating and distributing valuable, relevant and consistent content to attract and retain a defined audience and to drive profitable customer action. So that's quite important, because why should you use content marketing? Yeah, first of all, you want to share knowledge. You want to share expertise of your company, of your person, depending on what your business is actually. You want to educate your customers. Your customers have questions. You want to answer them. You are the expert to answer those questions. So provide them with content they are really looking for on search engines and so on. And by that, you can build credibility, make customers and partners believe in you, trust you. If you look at the numbers of what content marketing did and what some of those stats do, is that 71% of the customers trust solutions that provide useful information without having the feeling that somebody or some business is trying to sell to them. If you look further to that, 85%, for example, really trusts ads and sponsored content if it really solves problem to their needs.
So we promised you 6 steps to build up your plan, and well, these are the steps that we've defined so far. So first, we're going to explain what content marketing is about. So the story of content marketing. So at least that we know what we are preparing. Secondly, we will be looking for your sweet spot, and so this is something that we will help you discover yourself. Then we set up goals. We will look for the right formats, the types based on your audience. Then start writing out the story, and then finally measuring the result and the outcome. So these are the 6 steps that we will discuss during this webinar, and that will hopefully lead to an easier or a better plan. Let's dive in the first one. So the story of content marketing. And in order to understand where content marketing comes from, it's good to see let's say, some examples of pioneers. John Deere is considered to be one of the first to really, well, let's say, engage in content marketing without really coining the term of content marketing. So it's a company that is focusing on farming machines, at least. And so at some point they said, we want to increase the level of contact that we have with our customers. And well, today it would be easier to set up a dialogue with your customers. But at that point, well, we're talking about the year 1895. They said, let's create some kind of magazine, and it's called The Furrow. And this is what they launched at that time. And still up to today, it's running. It has 1.5 million subscriptions, so there's a lot of people reading this magazine still today. There's even an online or a tablet version available today. So that was one of the earliest examples that we could find on content marketing, and a really important one because it increased the relationship from John Deere with their consumers, with their customers, with their audience. Some other examples which are just as remarkable, I would say, and which are also both very known. The first one is Michelin. I think the Michelin tire company is known by everyone. And so at some point they said, we want to encourage people to drive because then they will use tires. And at the time, tires had to be changed more regularly. So when they would, people or drivers would be on their way and they had to have their tires changed, then they could wait for it, or then look for something to eat in the neighborhood. And so this is where the Michelin guides came from. So in the year 1900 they started this guide, and in the meantime it has grown out as the reference of defining where you can get the best food on earth and the best restaurants with the Michelin stars. So it's world famous, and well, it's far from the tires, but it's always about the story, and this is some way to create more impact onto the world. So it's a very good example. A second example, and which is perhaps less known, is at Procter Gamble, which is a huge multinational selling all types of paperware, soaps, etc. They have literally hundreds of products. Already in 1952 they started recording and publishing soap operas. So they are actually the soap opera inventors, I would consider. And so they launched Guiding Light. Guiding Light is being listed as one of the longest running TV dramas of this in the world. So there been there had been over 18,000 episodes if you include the radio episodes before the TV recordings, because they were first on radio. So it was a period of over 70 years. And so during a very long time, they were trying to be in permanent contact with their customers. And then obviously the soap products like Ivory and so on, they were promoted through that channel. So with Guiding Lights, so they were listed in the Guinness Book of World Records. And by the way, that's also a good example of content marketing, because Guinness is obviously beer, and now you know the Guinness Book of world records is also a very known concept, which is not always linked to the beer itself, but it's also an example of content marketing. But how does it work today, and who are the good examples of today? Let's see.
One of the main characters nowadays, a guy who really had a dive into the subject of content marketing, is Joe Pulizzi. Joe Pulizzi started his company in the 90s, and he's well famous for the Content Marketing Institute. So if you really want to dive into the subject of content marketing, take a look at contentmarketinginstitute.com. You can download ebooks, white papers, whatever you want about the topic. But he's also the guy who wrote several books like Epic Content or Content Inc. So really read those books. And also, mid-90s, he interviewed the other marketing guru, meaning Seth Godin. And Seth Godin said the wise words, well, according to us, content marketing is the only marketing that's left. And I think he's right. So now, second part, know your sweet spot. Christophe will explain you why.
Yeah, first we will talk about the why, and this is something that is perhaps more generic because it's also a basic concept to draft your corporate strategy. It's Simon Sinek's methodology to start with the why and define your why, the how, and the what. So the question is, what are you selling to who, and what is your customer buying, and most importantly, why is he buying it? And that appears to be the most challenging question to answer. But before we can start our content marketing campaign, we definitely have to define our why or your why. So imagine you're a sports brand and you want to, you know that you are selling products and tools perhaps, but yeah, if you want to identify your why, then you would have to let go of your products and think on a more holistic level. For instance, it could be that your conviction is that you make sports. You want to make sports more fun and more challenging, and that would be an ideal way to create a more healthy society. That could be your conviction. That could be your why, and that could be something that your audience can identify itself with. So that may be a good definition of the why. The how is then by making your products stand out in terms of design or usability, and then finally you have the what, which are your actual products, your tools. It could be sport shoes, training suits, what have you. And this is how you build up your why. It is a start of our content marketing campaign and of defining what we stand for and who we want to be when we are putting ourselves out there. So you start by looking inside your company and defining your why. The next step is to look outside, and for that I'll have Rien explain how that works.
You always have to look at your customers, because your customers are looking for answers. They have needs, they have interests, and there's a goal in their life to have answers on certain challenges. And you can answer some of those questions, not all, but some of them. And because it's in your DNA, to show your expertise and to show added value to customers, because otherwise you won't sell anything. So the match between those two is actually the sweet spot of the company. That's the part that you have to communicate about, that you have to write a story about, because that part will answer questions from your customers and give them some goals and to meet your DNA. But if you look further than that, you will see that there are other elements, not in your company, but externally, that influence the behavior or the sweet spot or the behavior of your customers. For example, your expertise and what your customers need, that will match, but there's also another match. For example, a failure of a competitor, because that competitor might fail in its communication or in its products. So you can take all these things, meaning that your sweet spot can enlarge or can get smaller and get more detailed. That will be your expertise. That's something you will talk about. Now, let's set our goals. We have 4 C's, the famous 4 C's of content marketing or a marketing strategy. And of course, the word itself, content marketing needs context. You need content to do something. If you don't have that, there's no content marketing. And of course, you need to have creativity. You can write flat texts without anything, but you need visualization, you need other stuff. We'll come to that further on. It needs to be consistent. It's of no use to start today and end tomorrow. If you start today with content marketing, make sure that you know that it's a long-term engagement. And please do know where your customer is. Do know the customer journey, where he is at his sales journey or his information searching journey. Make sure you know where he is. And next to that, you also have 3 other C's that are quite important, specifically nowadays in these modern times. Companies want to build a community. They want to attract people more to them in detail. You have content curation. Will it be done internally? Will it be done externally? In your community, are there people that are writing stuff, that are sharing stuff? Can you use that again? And then, of course, conversation. If you want to make a conversation with your customer, make sure they are prepared for that, that you are ready for that to do so.
And here you can see some examples of a content marketing campaign and what type of, well, I would say what type of targets and goals that that you could define. Because using those 7 C's should lead to, well, setting specific metrics, specific things that you can measure, which are the targets of your campaign. So brand awareness, lead generation, customer loyalty, these are just a few of those examples that we have. And based on these 7 C's, we can then derive, together with the information that we already defined before, where we talked about the sweet spot, and this should lead you to, well, a specific target of your content marketing campaign. Now, if we know what the goals are of our campaign, then we can start building it up and look at, well, let's see formats, discuss formats, the types, and our audience. Well, and the audience, Rien, who is that?
Well, there's a difference between B2C and B2B. Well, a difference, there's a match, as you clearly see on the picture. But for B2C, you know that what's very important over there to define is the age, the stage of life, location, the language, of course, what he or she is speaking, the income, and how he or she spends his income during shopping. Will it be online? Will it be offline? What are the needs and what are the challenges? If you're looking at the B2B part, you know that there are several sectors. Meaning the type, you have to know the type of the company, the size of the company might be important, and the specific sector the company is active in, and of course internally or externally, depending on the influence, which are the decision-making units and what's the role and etc. Of that company. So do make sure that you understand the demographics, meaning your audience. And you can do that by asking the right questions. Because in many marketing meetings or management meetings, people start guessing what might be the ideal audience or the ideal target group. But you need to define the needs, the pain points, and perhaps the online behavior of your customer. So just go to your customer and ask him, what are your wishes? What are your setbacks? Why don't you buy our stuff, or do you buy something else elsewhere? What's your influence? How do you search or how do you seek for information? And of course, you cannot do right for everybody. So please dare to exclude. Dare to exclude a specific target group that is not relevant at this moment or at this time.
When you look at the formats, so we've in the meantime we've asked the questions to our audience. We know what our audience wants, and so we can also ask them what type of format that they would use, what they would expect from us, and so we can take that into account by then making a choice. So if we have people that are still reading a lot and they don't like video, then we should not be recording videos. On the other hand, it's always a matter of mix and always a matter of evolution. So do keep your entire audience into account when you define your formats. You can go for the creation of an app. You can go. You can create a game and so on. For instance, Tony Hawk is a famous skater who at some point said, "Okay, I'm going to design a skate game, which is now world famous still." You have some channels or some formats at least which you can claim. Like for instance, video companies like Monster or Red Bull, they will do a lot of video recording of extreme sports and so on, which they will then make available on different channels. When it comes to events, you have the Mac Forum from Apple, which used to be recorded in San Francisco, where they launched, for instance, the first iPhone. So these kind of events, and this is something that they really start claiming, and so these are really good examples of choosing the right format for the right type of audience and their expectations. If we know the format, based on the requests and the profile of our audience, then we also will have to choose a content type. And HubSpot has listed, and you can see this is a huge list of a number of types. And also here, it's a matter of making the right choice. So you can start doing quizzes, creating lists, and also there, if you do the things right, it's a matter of choosing the right mix. But at some point, you can even claim a certain type. For instance, Forbes has their lists, and they publish a list, for instance, of the richest people in the world each year. Or analysts such as Gartner or Deloitte, they tend to do predictions and to write that in a report and make that available. So these are content types that are claimed by some companies and which are addressing they are offered in the right format, obviously, and addressing the right audience or their audience. And so this is a way to build it up. So choose wisely when it comes to both your type and your format, and look and ask your customer what he or she expects. Then there's a good tip, and this is an example. Check out the website through Google. You can obviously find Chris Lake's periodic table of content marketing. So it summarizes all the types of, let's say, platforms, the formats, the content types, the goals you could use, and so everything is summarized into Chris Lake's content marketing table, built up like the Mendeleev table, obviously. So do check that out. That brings us to our next topic. So we first discussed about the history. We talked about what content marketing is, how to look for the sweet spots, how to set your goals, how to define your formats, your types based on the audience. And so now it's time to build up that story. Now, the story is, I would already start giving you some tips on building up that story. First of all, think of not yourself or your products as being the main character of your story, but think about your customer when you define the hero of your story. Then we should look at building up the story itself. And there you go from a problem towards a certain solution. So it means that you start by identifying the problem that sounds familiar to your audience, and then taking them in small steps. And that's immediately the third tip, step by step in a phased approach. You bring them from a problem to possible solutions. And then from these possible solutions, you take them to your solution and the reason why they should be solving their problem with your solution. And this is how you build it up in stages, and you step by step engage with your audience. And this is how you build up your story. An important remark there is, well, you shouldn't be focusing too much on the beginnings and the endings. It's just about the story itself and the content you want to share. And it's the fact that you need to make it an emotional story. So that is key. Now, building up a story, so these are a few tips that can already lead you to the right content, but then it's a matter of defining the content or building up that content in a certain way. And for that, I will ask Rien to take over.
Thanks. There is a story wheel. And the middle of the wheel are actually your products or your services. But as mentioned before, you cannot shout about your products or services because nobody will listen, nobody will buy your products. And people don't care about your products directly. They have a certain problem, they want a certain solution. So if you can talk about how you can solve problems in the customer's mind by talking about the daily life of your customer, you are a big leap ahead, a big step ahead, because you talk about peripheral content that is related to the daily life of your customer. If you want to have it broader than that, you can also talk about societal content. Please take into account that this can be a little bit dangerous because you have to be well known about society, or have to know what lives in society, because that's very important to do so. But let's take an example. We talked about Michelin earlier. Michelin sells tires. Tires can be put on trucks, on cars, on motorcycles, on bicycles, whatever. But nobody cares about a tire on his car. Ask somebody which type of tire, which kind of tire, which brand of tire he or she has. Nobody, or 80% of the people, won't know. But what they do know is that they need a tire, because that's the only thing with the road that touches the road, of course, and that's very important when you go, for example, skiing, because you have to drive to the snow with your car. You need tires that are available or are applicable to drive through snow. So you can talk about how you drive through snow, how you have the braking distance, talk about safety and so on. So you have peripheral content. Take it one step further, like Michelin did before, during over 100 years, you can have the Michelin guide with the best restaurants, the best places to eat, and so on. Now, some companies ask, yeah, but what should I talk about? Because perhaps I do not have any inspiration. And then I tell them, you have lots of inspiration. Just take your desk, take your drawer, open your drawer, turn it around, and you see what falls out. And lots of stuff was made 10, 5, 15 years ago. Posters, ads, brochures, whatever, name it, you have it somewhere in your archive. Think of the success of things on Twitter or social media like the hashtag TBT or Throwback Thursday. Every Thursday we mention something that was done several years ago. For example, Volkswagen did with the Beetle, or Pepsi did with their old logo. So you have lots of examples. Think about what Facebook does every time you open Facebook. Did you know what happened 1 year ago, 5 years ago? So lots of examples. Lots of stuff. Just open a drawer, shake it, and you will see what falls out.
Remember, we're building up our story, and then, well, the last part is to know how we will bring that story towards our audience. We have our certain types and formats, and so that will probably limit you in a certain way. But yeah, let's say that the channels that are at offer today, or that are available today, it's nearly endless. So the question is, which one should you pick? Also there, it's one of the questions you should definitely ask your customer. This is what Rien said before, dare to ask your customers and dare to exclude, because it's like a radio station. Whenever you open one of these channels, you need to continue broadcasting. You cannot start a radio station and say, I'm going to broadcast on Monday and I won't do anything on Tuesday, because then your audience will be gone whenever you try to reopen shop on Wednesday. So it's a matter of making choices and sticking to it, being consistent. There's one important one, and this is what you can see on the slide, which is highlighted in yellow. It's your website, because in fact your websites and your microsites, those are the only media, I would say, or the only channels that you own. So it's a matter of looking at these broad social channels to reach a broad audience. So there's a difference in there's partly paid media, there's earned media, as they say, and there's this borrowed media, which is the social part. But then it should all point to the one medium that you control, and well, in most cases, this is a website. So this should be your central point, your main channel to share your content. Well, and then if we've run through the entire already 5 steps, nearly through the entire process, and the last part is to really when your campaign is running, to start measuring and making sure that you maintain your campaigns at level. There's different ways to do this. We talked about setting targets and choosing targets, but usually these content marketing targets or the campaign targets are not always the ones that you will follow up on, but you need to find the right measure points to follow up on. So it could be a number of page views, number of downloads, members to a community, the level of engagement or interaction that you have. These are typically things that you can put forward, that you can measure, and that you can measure on a regular basis, because this is one of the advantages of doing online marketing, is the fact that you can have a permanent way of measuring things. It's just a matter here, and this is perhaps a top tip, is to make sure that you put the right measurements forward, because for instance, if you want to generate leads and you're only measuring the number of visitors onto your website but not measuring the conversion towards leads, then you may be missing something. So make sure that you put the right measurements forward, and that you use the right points to keep your campaign at level. And by doing a permanent measurement, you can already adjust your campaign and change the story, or adapt the channel, or choose another format, and so on. This is something that will help you keep your content marketing campaigns perform at best.
You just saw that the workload might be high, might be big, because it's not the work of one person. It's the whole company that should be there if you roll out a content marketing strategy. And that means that you need guidelines, because as a company, you are becoming a publisher, you are becoming the director of the movie. And one of those guidelines is, of course, the tone of voice. No need to be communicating in a funny way with cartoons and stuff if you have a serious or a severe image as a company. So make sure your copy is really focused onto that. Don't make any mistakes. Do read those things. Use a real copywriter, and use a copywriter that also knows something about search engine optimization, because search engines need food as well. You need to know what people are looking for, how they look, the online behavior, remember that we talked about? And also the branding of your company. Make sure that you put your logo on the right image. Don't use stock images. Use something, be creative, be authentic, use the right language, and of course, do a fact check. If you link to certain news, if you link to certain websites or whatever, make sure that it's not fake news. As we have seen over the last few years, that fake news is really a problem, also for companies or associations. So therefore, some tips. There are new rules. In the early days of marketing, you had companies yelling at the customers, please buy, I want to sell to you. And it's not a question of how we do it, but who does it? Who's doing the content marketing, and who's your target group? Think of all the influencers that are existing nowadays on YouTube, on social media. Those are your gatekeepers. They will decide if people buy at your company or not. So influencers, media, channels, they will decide what will happen with your communication. And please do keep in mind that there are also technological possibilities showing up every day, every year. Think about the success of TikTok in a short term. Make sure that your content marketing is customized, that it is authentic, that it is linked to what you stand for, what you do, that it is necessity driven, and it's accessible at all times for your customers.
And this, brings us to the end of the last step, of the sixth step that we've set out, and it's time to do a short recap. So you remember that we talked about the concept of content marketing. We talked about the fact that it's a proven concept. You know what it's about. We've helped you to define your sweet spot, to set your goals, and this is actually the first part. It's a preparation of our content marketing campaign. And then we have the rollout. We chosen the format, the right type, based on the requests and the profile of the audience. We've talked about setting up the storyline, so not only talking about products, but also about peripheral and societal content. And the example, remember the example of Michelin. And then how to measure and maintain your campaigns. And by following these steps, these 6 steps, you should be able to draft your own content marketing campaign, content marketing strategy. And remember that on our website, you can download the model, the content marketing model, which should definitely help you to structure everything in the right format. So, we now are at the end of this webinar. We still have Q&A, so I hope we haven't checked yet, but we will, Rien and I will just run off to our desks, and then we can answer your questions and answers. And so we look forward to seeing you in just a bit. Thank you.